Any language requires a mechanism to distinguish between three core components: the primary actor, the direct physical target, and the ultimate recipient. In German syntax, the primary mechanical engine used to mark this ultimate recipient or beneficiary is the dative case. We see this mechanic at work in a standard sentence. Der Kellner bringt dem Gast das Essen. The waiter brings the food to the guest. The phrase dem Gast is our specific anomaly here. It operates under a distinct set of rules that separate it from the subject and the direct object. To understand exactly how and why this phrase shifts, we are going to build a complete syntactical model of the German dative case from the ground up. We will construct this model across four operational pillars: morphological shifts, single object valency, ditransitive sentences, and experience or adjectives. Isolating these four components reveals the dative as a predictable, integrated system of logic. The bedrock of this system relies on morphological shifts. The case requires a complete change in how articles are formed before a noun. This comparative matrix maps the specific structural shifts, starting with the masculine gender. In the dative, masculine definite articles become dem, and indefinite articles become einem. The neuter shift converges perfectly with these forms. Its definite article is also dem, and its indefinite is einem. The feminine shift contrasts with this pattern. The definite article changes to der, and the indefinite becomes einer. Finally, the plural definite article shifts to den. Exactly like the nominative and accusative cases, there is no indefinite plural article in the dative. This morphological convergence simplifies the matrix. Because masculine and neuter behaviors are permanently grouped together, the memory load is significantly reduced. Was the word morphology established, we can transition to sentence structure by looking at verbal valency, the rule set dictating how specific verbs demand specific cases from surrounding objects. German contains a locked category of approximately 50 single-object verbs that inherently require the dative case to function. This network graph visualizes the required relationship for the verb helfen, meaning to help. We can map our first case study here. Der Mann hilft der Frau. The man helps the woman. The verb assigns rigid structural roles. Der Mann is the nominative subject executing the action, and der Frau is forced into the dative recipient role. We can swap the central verb node to analyze another primary example, gehören, meaning to belong. Mapping the sentence, der Hund gehört der Frau, the dog belongs to the woman, yields the exact same structural output. The underlying logic governing these verbs is semantic. Their action implies providing for a beneficiary or assigning ownership to someone, rather than physically impacting a direct target. Valency shows us that the dative is a strict marker of fundamental thematic relationships. This logic scales up into the ditransitive framework, complex sentences that require three distinct arguments to function properly. This expanded graph maps a three-node system using the sentence, Der Mann gibt der Frau einen Brief. The man gives a letter to the woman. The subject role, der Mann, is our nominative actor initiating the transfer. The accusative object is einen Brief. This item experiences direct contact with the verb's action. It is the physical thing being given.
The dative object is der Frau. She experiences indirect contact with the action, serving as the ultimate destination of the transfer. This dual puce requirement applies across common transaction verbs like schreiben, to write, or erzählen, to tell. We can stress test this model with a final ditransitive case study. Ich erkläre den Studenten den Dativ. I explain the dative to the students. Ich maps perfectly to the nominative subject. Den Dativ is the accusative direct object experiencing the explanation, and den Studenten is our dative indirect object, taking the plural dative article den. The ditransitive engine rigidly assigns cases based strictly on semantic proximity, direct versus indirect contact with the primary action. Now we must shift our analytical focus from which morphological cases to use to where they must physically reside in the sentence, the rules of syntactic topology. Looking at a typographic layout of our master sentence, Der Kellner bringt den Gast das Essen, a bounding box dictates the placement of the nouns. The baseline topological rule is clear. In standard German sentences containing two full noun objects, the dative object must strictly precede the accusative object. The sequence is fixed for nouns, though the topology becomes more dynamic when pronouns enter the frame. If we replace the direct object das Essen with the pronoun es, the accusative object will typically jump ahead of the dative recipient. But the dative case is also utilized in a completely distinct syntactical environment, expressing physiological states and adjectives. German structurally distinguishes between describing an intrinsic characteristic of a subject versus describing an external experience happening to them. This is why the direct translation, Ich bin heiß, is a grammatically dangerous construction for expressing temperature. Using the nominative subject here maps the temperature as an intrinsic physical characteristic, altering the semantic meaning from temperature to physical attractiveness. The correct construction relies on the dative case, mir ist heiß. This exact logic applies to other physiological states. You feel cold by saying mir ist kalt, and you express feeling bored with mir ist langweilig. By forcing the pronoun into the dative, German casts the speaker as the experiencer of a state happening to them, maintaining total structural consistency with the concept of the indirect recipient. Zooming out, this summary diagram maps the syntactical model we've engineered. We have a unified engine driven by morphological convergence, regulated by verbal valency, and ordered by rigid topology. The final locked variable involves specific prepositions, like mit or by, which unilaterally trigger the dative case. These prepositions operate on an entirely separate structural logic that demands its own dedicated analysis. To cement this theoretical model, we need to run a practical application test. Your assignment is to construct a ditransitive sentence down in the comments, using one of 4 verbs, geben, bringen, zeigen, or kochen. Ensure you cross-reference all 3 rules, apply both accusative and dative morphology, manage the dual valency of the objects, and execute the correct topological word order. Mastering the dative provides the precise structural coordination required to map the relationship between every actor and recipient in the German language.